few months ago, I was talking to a photographer that I've known for years. She's a really good shooter. She has super solid work, and she's been at it a lot longer than most people in the game. And she said something that I've been thinking about ever since. She said, I don't really understand what happened. I used to be really booked, and now I'm lucky if I get a couple of inquiries a month. I don't know what I did wrong. And the thing is, she didn't do anything wrong. That's what makes it so hard to get your head around. She keeps shooting, she keeps posting, she keeps showing up, and the clients just stop coming in the way they used to. Here's what I think actually happened. People didn't stop wanting photographs. That's the first thing to understand, because it's easy to look at the lack of inquiries and decide that the whole industry is dying and that everyone has a phone now and it's over. That's not what's happening. What happened is that the market reorganized quietly. Over the past 5 years or so, while most of us were focused on doing the work itself, the demand for photography shifted towards personal branding and content creation and what I'd call AI-adjacent visual identity. The people that used to hire a photographer once every couple of years for a headshot now need a steady stream of images because they're building an audience and they're running a business online. They're showing up on LinkedIn and Instagram and their own website and anywhere else people might look them up. There's actually more demand for photography, not less. But it's a demand that wants something different on a different timeline with a different conversation around value. And if you still position yourself as the photographer who does beautiful portraits for people who want a nice photo for their wall, you're talking to a shrinking audience, while a different and larger audience is out there actively looking for someone who understands what it is they're trying to build. So why did so many photographers miss this? I think about this a lot, and I got a bunch of theories, mostly because I was doing the same thing. The photography education world spent the better part of a decade teaching photographers how to compete with other photographers on pricing strategy and client experience and how to position yourself against the person charging half your rate in the same town. It's all useful stuff. Seriously, I'm not putting it down, but it kept us in a conversation with ourselves instead of with the people who actually needed to hire us. While we were spending all of our time refining our client workflow and building the pixie set galleries and debating whether or not to include prints in our packages, the personal branding market was really growing fast, and the people in it were largely working with whoever they could find who would listen to what they actually needed, which a lot of the time wasn't a photographer who led with art. They were looking for someone who could help them look credible or approachable or competent for a specific audience, and then turn it around without making the whole thing feel like an event or an experience. That's a solvable problem, and it's a problem photographers are exceptionally well positioned to solve. We just weren't talking to those people. Now, let me be straight with myself here, because I live this. I spent years at StoneTree doing exactly what I described, refining the experience and elevating the product and building towards the fine art end of the market, which I believe in and still do. And I had a period where I looked up and I realized that I had built something genuinely good that only a genuinely small number of people in Western Maine were going to find organically. The work was right, but the positioning was too narrow and too quiet. What I've been doing since is holding both things at once: the integrity of the portrait work and the willingness to speak clearly to people who are building something and need a visual identity to do it. Those two things are not in conflict. The unfiltered experience that I have is still my anchor, but the conversation I'm having now includes people who never would have walked through the door 3 years ago because they didn't know I existed, and I certainly wasn't saying anything that sounded like it was for them. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying abandon your aesthetic or chase every trend or do whatever the market wants. That's a really fast way to end up doing work you hate for people who don't value it. What I am saying is that the conversation you're having in your marketing, on your website copy, in how you talk about what you do, it probably needs to expand. The photographers that I see doing really well right now are not necessarily the ones doing the most technically impressive work. They're the ones who are clearly communicating to a specific person with a specific problem. They're saying, If you're building a personal brand and you need images that make you look like you know what you're doing, I understand what that actually requires, so I can help you get there. That's a really different conversation than I create timeless portraits that capture who you are. But here's the thing, both of those things can be true, but only one of them speaks to someone who is actively trying to solve a problem right now. So if you're looking around and you feel like the floor kind of dropped out of your market and you can't figure out why, I'd push back on the idea that you're doing something wrong. The more likely explanation is that the people you used to serve are still out there, and there's a whole category of people who need what you do and don't know you exist yet. And the gap between you and them is mostly a conversation you haven't figured out how to start. The market moved. That doesn't mean it moved away from you forever. It just means you might have to move a little to go meet it. So I want to know what you're seeing in your own market. Have you had to adjust how you talk about what you do in your work to reach a different type of client? What changed? What stayed the same? Drop it down there in the comments, and I'll talk to you soon.